Okay, welcome back to Straight Talk, and we're discussing things going on in and around Kahnawake. Our next topic of discussion, I believe, is going to be the...
Well, a couple of things that just on the Kahnawake.com site, press releases from the council. One of which is, and this is huge, I think, for our young athletes in the community, is that this is the equivalent of a city competing for the Olympics. And then somewhere a year before saying, oh, well, we realized we couldn't handle it, whatever. So Milwaukee, Wisconsin competed for and got the 2011 Indigenous Games nod to host the games. Recently, they pulled out. They said, well, we thought we can't do it. Whatever the thing is, there's nothing really official yet in terms of a press release, except that people know it's a fact. And the fact is that the other city that was competing was in Saskatchewan. And the Saskatchewan guys, like the FSNI, the Federation of Saskatchewan Indian Nations, politically as a body, figured, well, maybe success worked against them because the Saskatchewan teams have dominated, according to them, the Indigenous
Well, they send
games.
like, I don't know, like 600 or
They have
700.
the largest block of the.
Yeah, they have a lot of
yeah.
athletes. So I mean, some of them are bound to stick.
Anyways, but
It's like the U.S. in the Olympics, right?
But was there a thing?
Exactly.
So they're raising the question: did it work against them? Was there a thing about, say, like jealousy or whatever that weighted against a Saskatchewan locale being chosen? That would have stuck with it. It's easy to say that they would stick to it, but it's never happened before, in my knowledge, since 1990. Has the games been canceled?
No, the games, actually, at the end of the games, I'm not sure if it was in Winnipeg or Denver, because I was at both of those. At the end of the games, they had awarded it, I believe, the last one before the one in BC, it was supposed to be Buffalo. And it was I remember the two cities vying for the games were Buffalo and New Mexico at the time. And I believe that was in Denver.
Okay.
And anyway, so it has happened. It has been precedents where a city has vied, put together a package, and been honored the games, and then after consideration and after looking at their infrastructure and whatnot, have pulled back.
So it's just a wait and see. I guess we'll find out who's going to get it next or who's going to accept it into their...
Well, according to Dave Canadian, there are already discussions about what to do to salvage, because the whole point in saying 6 years or whatever the difference is between the games is too long for our athletes, our kids, young people like yourself, Chrissy, competing in the games, to have to wait.
Right.
So they're looking at trying to do something to salvage competitions in Ontario at a higher level. That's very important. So it is a watch and.
But is it because that there's not enough time now to fast track it somewhere else?
I don't know. Maybe, who knows? Somebody will come up and say, "Look, Saskatchewan, can you guys do this? Can you really pull this off?" Then by all means to do it.
Well, it's
if
huge.
they're saying that you
thing.
can't do it, then that's what they're saying. But we'll see.
When you put a bid in, it's usually been worked on for a couple or several years. When you're working on that bid, but trying to get the infrastructure in place, all the locations, all the gyms, all the the different places, plus accommodations, and even now they're not going to be hosting adult or senior athletes anymore. It's strictly going to be kids. So I mean, this is pretty disappointing. Very disappointing for some kids that are youth now, and then in 4 or 5 years they're going to be adult and they won't be able to compete.
So they're downsizing,
what kind of incentive is that going to be? I don't know.
All right, so that's the
anyway.
thing. We'll wait and watch and see on that. The other thing that to just briefly touch on is that the investigator has been named. This goes back to the complaint against Mohawk Councillor Carl Horn. So Larry Hay, who was actually a former chief of police, Tyne-Dunega Police, is the guy who's going to be conducting the investigation on that. he won't actually sign the contract till the 21st of this month. And so 30 days after that, we'll be looking at a decision being rendered.
You know, we need a different type of system in this community. You know, I think that, you know, they're trying to be as transparent as possible, but going this way is ridiculous. There should be a body in this community that looks at this to see how much how valid is it, the complaint, and what are the circumstances surrounding it. Just because it's a counselor or if it's one of the police or something, they always, you know, they always try to get somebody else. And how many times now have Mohawk councils been through this situation to hire somebody from out of the community to look at something? And I don't think once, in all the times that they have done it, did they actually take the recommendations of the investigator who had done it. They had Jerry Swamp from Aguasasne before. They had a lawyer from, what was his name, with Keith? Anyway, they're taking, and then there was always recommendations to, you know what, leave it alone, and you know, don't put yourself in that position. Don't try to be the judge and jury in the situation.
And then ignore the recommendations.
Yeah, I'm not saying that the complaint is not valid, but I don't think that it warrants us to outsource an investigation to anybody. Mm-hmm. We have our own people in this community that could do it.
Yeah, I feel that way as well. But there's also a certain amount of objectivity that's necessary in regarding to somebody as a public figure.
But you know what? The thing is what is actually in place for as a council chief? This didn't happen at work. It happened, you know, externally. I don't think that council should be involved at all. The complaint shouldn't go. It should go somewhere. You know what I mean? It's now, unless there was an assault or something, then obviously it becomes a policing issue. But as a other complaint, it's improper. You know, they didn't do this. They do. You know what? They don't have really anything.
But what body would that be, though? I mean, you look at it. I mean, sometimes there is a body, and we'll talk about that when we get to ABC. The decision there. Apparently, there is an arbitration body within the ABC thing.
Yeah, and that's another issue that we're gonna look at.
But one thing is when. I mean, to play the devil's advocate on that. I mean, would it be? I mean, if somebody from in the community was to decide, you know, the Court of Kahnawake, all of a sudden, you know, I mean, that's not necessarily seen as being acceptable to people either. You know, that perception, you know, of them being, you know, naturally weighted on the side of, you know, maybe counsel in a given situation or another thing.
That's what I'm saying. There's a certain amount of objectivity and removal and conflict of interest, and all those issues start to come up. And then if somebody does make a decision, whether it's followed or not, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
Yeah, but then, you know why? Because it comes to the same situation as was with Keith Mayo. The problem is that whatever they're going to end up doing at the end of the day, whatever the results are, whether they're in favor or they're not in favor. If they're not in favor of it, then again, Mohawk Council is again making a decision about one of their own, which shouldn't happen. Okay. Mohawk Council shouldn't be outsourcing anybody. I believe that there should be some type of an ombudsman's office or a community panel of individuals with some credibility, not tied to MCK or not appointed by them, to address all these issues, whether it's the police, whether it's the fire, whether it's conservation, whether it's a council chief, all the professions in our community, and go to that panel and let them look at it to find out. Because a lot of it in our community becomes a pissing contest, and I don't like you, and I'm going to make a complaint about you. So we're going to spend thousands of dollars to outsource the information to somebody else, and we're not going to take the recommendations if that's what we want to do. And I don't know what the situation in this case is, and I'm strong about that because I see it happening all the time, and it continues every year.
This community itself is, and that's something I've commented on over the years, is that there's a difference between professionalism and then there's a difference between personal, you know, personal or individual. You know, too many people are personal.
So even if we do have a panel, like what you were saying, there's always that problem with people being on it being biased. And it happens in everything, and I think that's what also happened on this, what we were going to talk about after the break. And yeah.
I just think though it's given the circumstances, as long as they're not appointed, if the community votes them in, then they should have, there shouldn't be any bias here. They should look at just the thing. I mean, it's always happens like
But
that.
I think that's why the MCK chooses to outsource or
Yeah.
look to non-community members to
Yeah.
look at.
But then they
our
also don't
problems.
understand, then there's also the flip side, again, hear me playing devil's advocate, there's the flip side of them not quite understanding the subtleties of a lot of the issues that we're talking about because they're not from this community.
Exactly.
It's like a
Whereas,
lose-lose
it's, like I
situation.
said, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't, you know, so like weighing those type of things, it's important that you have background, but no real connection. I mean, not having a connection because we all are connected one way or another, but if we can learn to be professional, is a different, you know, and leaving personal things behind. You
But
know?
then who polices that? That's where we are right now.
Mhm.
So
It's an interesting concept, as always.
That's the process that, again, is going to be named. We'll see what comes out of that. At the end of the day, we'll know. I mean, this isn't going to determine whether Carl Horn continues on as chief or anything else. It may determine whether or not there was any grounds. Hopefully, you know, was it just one of those nuisance kind of things? I don't like you, and you're in this, and whatever, and you're involved in this, and now I'm going to get at you, kind of thing. If there are recommendations, we'll see if the council follows them or not. As you say, I mean, that was an issue that that was raised with the Keith Mile thing. Was there recommendations made, even not to do follow a certain course of action, but then it was decided to go ahead with it anyways.
and we
things
paid
go
for
where
it.
they
The
go.
community paid for it again. So
Yeah, always. So anyways, we'll know in 30 days, roughly speaking. And then the other one here, and this will do the segue into the other thing, is very briefly, today there was a meeting taking place. Peter Paul, who is part of a group of guys, local business guys, who have started a lottery, Wista Lottery in Kahnawake. The council is upset about this. John D. is upset about it, that they went this way. We'll be back to discuss that after this break.